see. Can you confirm if the stream started, please? Oh, yeah, looks like it's up. Brian's saying.
Good. Okay, shall we kick off then? So good evening, it's now 7:04 and I'd like to start the meeting of the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Lynn Worrell and I am the chair of this committee. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and to the council's YouTube account and also recorded for the publication on the council website. I would also like to remind members and officers to mute their microphone when not speaking and to use your raise your hand option when you do wish to speak. I will give everyone the opportunity to speak at the end of each item. So moving on to item 1, which is apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillor Haldon and Councillor Piccolo is substituting in his place. We've also received apologies from Councillor Churchman and Councillor Joy Redsaw is not on the meeting but may join us a bit later. And Tenant Rep Lynn Mansfield has submitted written questions which Wendy from Dem Services will read out. And I propose that what we do is where the relevant item is on the agenda that we do Lynn's questions first to make sure that they're covered. I hope that's all okay with everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's okay? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Moving on to item 2, which is the minutes of the last meeting. I move the minutes of the Housing Overview and Scrutiny meeting held on the 11th of February to be approved as correct. Record of meeting. Agreed?
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay. And does anybody have any comments on the accuracy of the meeting, of the minutes?
No.
No, I just have one item of matters arising from that, in that on page 12, it was about the complaint figures in the housing performance, and we didn't have the percentages, the complaints levels that were upheld, and we were going to receive them from officers, and we didn't receive them. So could we have them, and hopefully, we can cover that because performance is back on again tonight. Could somebody make a note for us to get those, please? So that's, other than that, that's all there. I've not agreed to any items of urgent business this evening, so we can move on to item 4. Does anybody have any declarations of interest?
No.
No? Okay. Item 5, we'll move on to the substantial agenda now. So we move on to item 5, which is a housing KPI performance for 1920 report on pages 15 to 22. And can I ask that Carol Hinvest introduces the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to work on the basis that everybody has had a chance to read the report. So I think what I would like to say overall is that the report shows a very strong year of performance for the housing service. As you can see on page 16, these are our corporate KPIs. And whilst 2 of them are red, both of those show increased performance. Well, the bed and breakfast one doesn't, but the satisfaction one definitely does. If you turn over the page, you can see how much better the overall satisfaction with the service has been was in the last year, 1920, compared to the 7 years before that for which we have data. I believe that the reason that this has improved so much is because we listened to the residents and acted on what they wanted us to do. One which was about communication, and as the report lays out, we've taken a number of measures to improve communication with residents. Sadly, the COVID epidemic has meant that we were unable to hold our annual tenants conference this year. That would have happened last week. But that was, unfortunately, we were unable to have that and it was cancelled. But we do want to have one next year. So that will continue to be an annual event. If you turn over to page 18, then you can see that if we look closer down into the detail of the service, satisfaction with those on all of those measures was higher in 1920 than it was in 1819. Apart from transforming homes was down marginally, but it was still performing above target. As we're moving now to external elements, so particularly the placement of single glazed windows in the first phase of the external works, then we will be hitting another one of those areas that residents have fed back that they're particularly concerned about. One thing I'd like to draw the committee's attention to is the rents team. The fact that we surpassed the collection target of 98%, collecting 98.5% of rent outstanding, was, I think, a real success of last year. The increasing rollout of universal credit becoming harder for all social landlords to meet rent collection targets. And so this was a real testament to the hard work of the team. There was a 40% increase in tenants claiming universal credit last year. They've all been contacted. There's a wide range of support offered by the financial inclusion officers. And as members may be aware, the financial inclusion officers won Team of the Year 2020 in the staff awards. Again, recognition from across the council to the wonderful work that they do. And finally, we look at the voids figures, both for standard voids and particularly for capital voids. There was a reduction in void turnaround time last year. Overall, that led to a decrease in the void rent loss of £73,000 over 2019-20, which is a big efficiency gain for the housing revenue account. Thank you. I have nothing else to say.
Okay, thanks for that, Carol. Wendy, do we have anything from Lynn on this report?
Yes, there is. Would you like me to go ahead?
Yeah, so let's do Lynn's first. Yeah.
Okay.
And anybody else, if you want to put your hands up if you want to speak.
Okay, so Linda said she does not see why the voids are increasing and these need to be looked at as they are far too high. She's aware there is standard, but these should be all the same. The full consultation that was undertaken was good, but she noted that there was no mention of LACs. I'm assuming that means local area coordinators, and they should be mentioned as the work they carry out is just as good as what inclusion officers undertake. So well done to LACs as well.
Can you repeat the first bit, Wendy? Because I'm not quite sure what the question was in that first bit about voids.
Yes, so she's, what was it? She doesn't understand why the voids are increasing, and she feels they need to be looked at as the voids seem quite high.
Okay, I don't think we have said that the number of voids is increasing, and certainly the number of days it takes to turn around a void has decreased for both standard voids and capital voids. So I'm not quite sure what she meant there. If you can email me over her questions at the end of the meeting, and with her email address, and I can always email her back and kind of confirm with her what it was she was saying, because I'm sorry, I really don't understand what she's getting at there. On the LACs, that's a very valid point, and they do great work, but this is a housing performance report. So that's why we haven't talked about them and why we have focused on the work done by the financial inclusion officers. To be able to collect 98.5% of rent in a very challenging atmosphere with welfare reform and the increase in the number of tenants on universal credit, that's why we focused on financial inclusion and not on local area coordinators, although we do obviously appreciate the work that they do in supporting us and our tenants, and we work together very closely with them in the appropriate cases. But not all of these people would need a local area coordinator to be involved. Just because they're suffering financial hardship doesn't mean that they need other services involved. They may just need some support around the benefits system and finances. But they're fabulous, we know that. Thank you, Lynn, for picking up the local area coordinators.
anybody, Kaiser, Terry, do you have anything, Kaiser?
Councillor Abbas, you're still on mute.
If you press 2 3 times. So on page 19, just basically a clarification, on page 19 at 3.5, on increase of universal credit 47%. So is this because of change in benefit system, or is it just because of change in these were new claimants?
It's mainly because these are new claimants or they've had a change in their circumstances. So if you have a change in circumstances, that will take you from your old benefits to universal credit. So most of them probably will have come onto universal credit because they moved house, but some of them will have lost their jobs. Some of them will have had a change in their circumstances, and that's why they're on universal credit. The government's, welfare reform agenda is to move the bulk of working age adults who are in receipt of benefits onto universal credit and away from what they call legacy benefits.
So if, for instance, there is a huge increase of 47%, and you have mentioned, the universal credit they get only for 51 weeks. So how are we going to cover this 1 week for these 47%?
Okay, so for those 47%, the officers, as I said, visited all 1,390 affected tenants to secure discretionary housing payments for them. We secured that for 55% of them. They have to put the application in them. Each one has to put an individual application in. So we couldn't apply for that for them. They all had to do it for themselves, and some people did, 55% did, and some didn't. This is only because it was a 53-week rent year, and those happen every 6 or 7 years. It's just about where Mondays fall and how the calendar works. So not every year is a 53-week year. They only come every 6 or 7 years. But many social landlords, the Chartered Institute of Housing, National Housing Federation, and other lobbying organisations asked the government to change the rules around universal credit to make it doesn't matter how many rent weeks there are in a year, which is what housing benefit does. Housing benefit pays regardless of the number of weeks, but the regulations around universal credit specify 52 weeks, and the government had other thing going on and thought this was quite a small thing, so they didn't change the regulations. So yes, this will only happen every, like I say, 5 or 6 years. So there's plenty of time for the regulations to be changed before it happens again.
Thank you.
Is that all you've got, Councillor Abbas? No more?
Sorry?
You've got no more?
Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Piccolo, have you got any questions?
I've just managed to unmute myself. I'm having trouble on the screen. But no, just to think it's a fine report to receive at this time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I've got a few questions. As you'd expect, I would have a few questions. So when we look on the two lists of measures shown on page 15 and 18, is this a full list of the measures, or is it wider than this that we do actually measure the housing performance on?
This is the corporate performance indicators. So these are the ones that are reported to corporate overview and scrutiny. Within the service, we have a whole raft of other indicators that we use to measure our performance. But these are the corporate indicators that are reported, like I said, to corporate overview and scrutiny.
So if a councillor wanted to drill down a bit further, you would be able to provide them that all,
yes.
Like we could separate housing out into away from flats and sheltered and low-rise flats. Would we be able to?
We don't report it like that usually. We report all the housing service together. So we don't break down in our performance indicators that we do for the rest of the service, apart from taking sheltered housing officers out of the tenancy management officers. We don't break flats and houses down. We don't break the service down between sheltered and general needs in the performance monitoring we do.
Okay then, I just thought that we might be able to do something different if we look like flats where there's caretaking services away from houses that don't get that.
I mean, it would be possible, but it would be extra work for Chris and his team of one person to do. So,
all right, Chris, I'll let you off, but I may come back for that. And also on KPI 7 on page 16, the numbers of families in B&Bs for over 6 weeks. Are these families now not in these B&Bs? And was they in borough placements?
On the first question, no, none of these families are still in bed and breakfast. And on the second question, I honestly don't know the answer. I'll have to go away and find that out for you.
Have we got, if they're not in there now, have we got none in bed and breakfast for over 6 weeks now?
We have no families in bed and breakfast for over 6 weeks now, no.
Okay, thank you very much. And going back to the complaints that I asked for last time, how many complaints has the service received in a year and how many were upheld? Do you know that?
Chris probably does, but I don't off the top of my head. Chris, can you answer that one for me, please?
Certainly can. Glad to bear with me. I've just got the information here. So, the Housing Service last year received 547 complaints, and 35.7% of those complaints were upheld.
So about a third upheld.
Yeah.
Third upheld. Thank you for that. And is there a trend, Chris? You know, is it an area within the housing department that there's a trend for complaints?
Not in terms of a trend. There are areas of the housing department that receive more complaints than others due to the nature of the service, such as repairs, for example. I think last year around 31,000 repairs were completed. So that's 31.
My next question. Well done.
So that's 31,000 transactions with tenants, and as there's so many transactions, there would naturally be more complaints for services like that.
Okay, and so I do have another question, which is on surveys. So it might be you again then, Chris. So if there's 31,000 repairs last year, why did we only carry out 2,679 surveys? That seems a small amount.
Yeah, we aim to carry out a sample of around 10% of all repairs completed. That's what we aim to do, and that is a little bit lower than 10%. But our market research contractor that completes our telephone satisfaction surveys has managed to get in touch with those tenants and actually get those tenants to agree to complete a survey as well. So sometimes it can sway between above and under 10%, but it's generally around 10%. And that I believe that is a statistically relevant cohort of tenants to actually gain a satisfaction score from. That is a large number of surveys.
Is that a marker? Sorry, I just was going to ask if that's a market marker against what other councils do. 10%.
I can't say I'm aware of the sample that other councils do.
I don't know. I think it's a reasonably representative example, I would have thought. Obviously, volumes vary dramatically between different landlords based on the number of properties that they have and the ageing condition of those properties. So where I used to work, they would do 70 to 80,000 repairs a year, but their stock was 22,000 tenanted properties and 9,000 leasehold properties. So the volume was much greater. I don't think they managed 10%. They did like 150 a month or something. So they didn't get to 10%, but the volume was so high, it would have been quite difficult to get to 10%. The other thing I was going to say is obviously we only have 10,000 properties.
Yeah.
So those 31,000, there are multiple repairs in some properties during a year. And I think the other thing we need to be aware of is not causing consultation fatigue in people by constantly ringing them up and asking them to do these surveys. So I think that might be another reason why it dips below 10%, because you can't keep asking the same people the same questions over and over again, because they just get fed up with it. Cool. Chris has got his hand up.
Yeah, the point Carol raised is a very valid point. Our market research contractor has actually completed around 5,700 tenant satisfaction surveys last year. And what they aim to do is they aim to not survey the same tenant within a 6-month period. because they don't want to keep phoning the same tenants for surveys. So that may well be the reason why that sample was slightly lower than 10% as well.
Okay, thank you. I think they do a good job. I've been up and visited them. I just didn't know whether, that was quite representative for us. And I do think it's a really good report, and the housing department's going in the right way for this. But I just didn't know whether it was representative. Thanks for that. And then moving on to page 19, what percentage of our residents receive universal credit, and how many actually pay in full? It's quite complicated, the rent process, isn't it?
Can you say that question again? Sorry, Councillor Worrell, I was turning the pages and I missed the beginning.
Oh, okay. How many is it 47% of our tenants actually are on universal credit?
This is the number for last year, yes.
Yes, okay.
It's more now.
And what is it now?
I don't know the percentage, but now it's 2,500 and something. So it's more than it was last year.
Wow. Okay, and likely to go up, we expect this year, I would guess.
It went up and then quite sharply, and most landlords have seen this. It went up quite sharply in April, and now the numbers of new claims we get each week have returned to a sort of normal between 10 and 20. There was 1 week where we got 47 or something. So there was 1 week where it was very high, but it's returned to the normal, which is between 10 and 20 a week.
Okay, thank you. Roger, I see your hand up.
You're muted, Roger.
I think your question was, do we have 47% of tenants on universal credit?
Yeah.
That's not. No,
that's not what it means.
That's
47% more.
It's a 47% increase in the number of tenants on So you will still have a significant number still on housing benefit. I don't know what the split is, but that was 47% increase, not 47% tenants.
Oh,
so
okay.
we have that's 40% increase in tenants. So as I say, with 2,500 at the moment on universal credit, we probably have another 1,500 who where housing benefits paid direct to us as the landlord, and the rest are paying their own rent.
Okay, thank you. And do you know the discretionary housing payments? Whose budget does that come out?
The government
The
government gives us a grant, and that's what we use. Oh gosh, I can't remember what the overall budget is. I think it's something like 250,000 or something like that. Roger, a bit higher than that.
I think it has been decreasing, but it was around about 500,000 a couple of years ago. I haven't managed to read it. It's meant to cover a whole range of things, from people that are on losing income because of the benefit cap. It was the I can't call it a single person
subsidy.
Spare room subsidy. So it was meant to address a number of welfare reform issues that were introduced a few years ago. More recently, as Karen said, we've used it in a different way, particularly to pick up that gap in that 52-53 week year issue. So it's a very important way of trying to, I suppose, ameliorate some of the problems around some of the issues around some parts of the welfare reform programme.
Okay, thank you. But it covers it, does it, Roger?
It doesn't cover it. It does have to be, it is only meant to be a short term. It is not meant to be a permanent rent subsidy. So it is meant to pick up, if someone is, experiencing difficulty either for whatever reason, they just fall foul of a particular quirk in the benefit rules or whatever it may be. It's meant to smooth out some of those sort of problem areas. And that 52-53 week issue was very much one of those problem areas. So it's not meant to be a permanent rent subsidy. It's meant to sort of sort out those one or two problems that occur occasionally. But it's about £500,000, and we all pretty much spend every year. But every year we look at what the criteria is. We review it. It's managed within the Revs Bend section. It's not actually within the housing management team. We take our advice when it's finally agreed.
Okay, thank you. I know many young people rely on it for HMOs as well, don't they? Because the rents of the HMO rooms are quite high, and that's somewhere that they go.
Yeah, it is only supposed to be temporary, and very few people get it for spare room subsidy anymore, because the idea is you sort yourself out whilst you've got it. So you move to a smaller place in the spare room subsidy, you get a lodger. If you're benefit capped, then get you into 16 hours work a week, and you won't be benefit capped anymore. So that's the idea, is it's a temporary thing to enable you to take the actions you need to take to get more affordable housing or resolve issues around welfare reform. So it doesn't go to very many people in the borough anymore for the spare room subsidy.
Okay, thank you. And I've just got one really quick last question, and that is about, and we'll probably cover it later in the COVID report, and is that, can we just confirm that we've not been using any bailiffs since March, or, you know, like for people that fall behind, what have we done to make sure that people don't have the added pressure?
That really falls into the COVID report, yes.
So can we,
no, we haven't been using
can we do it now, or do you want me to do it a bit later?
We might as well do it now, as you've asked. So we don't use bailiffs. We haven't evicted anybody because there's been no evictions going through the courts. We may have done some in March before lockdown, but we haven't done any since because you can't do them. It's not legal. So we haven't evicted anybody since early March, if we evicted anybody in early March. So we haven't done any whilst the lockdown's been on. At the moment, we are not serving notices of seeking possession. Even if we did, we wouldn't be going to court with anything with any new cases until October. Right. So because you can't serve them again until you can't activate them until August, and then they have 3 months to run before you can get into court anyway. So we wouldn't be going to court until October at the earliest. So we've been trying to work with people and encouraging them to pay, work in financial inclusion. We have been reminding people. Last year we bought subscribed to a system called Rent Sense to sort of help manage the caseload in the rents and welfare team, and they have a texting product that they gave us for free for 3 months during lockdown. We've been using that, and that's been proving successful in communicating with our residents. It's just a different channel that we had access to before, so that's been very useful. So we're now going to enter into a longer term contract with them to purchase a more sophisticated product, right, which will do a lot more things.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thanks for that. Councillor Baker, have you got anything that you wanted to raise in this report? Have we not got Chris?
No. Councillor Baker's on mute. I don't know if that's
yes, I don't know whether he knows. Have you got anything?
No, just at least obviously taking everything in, but at the moment, no.
Okay. Okay, then thank you. So, nobody else got anything they want to come back with? No. So, are all members in agreement with recommendations outlined within the report on page 15?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, which is the tenant and leaseholder satisfactory monitoring report on page 23 to 30. And can I ask Chris Smith-Siemens to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The report is all about tenant and leaseholder satisfaction, and basically section 2 of that report takes you through what we do in general terms in terms of measuring tenant and leaseholder satisfaction, the types of surveys that we complete, which are perception and transactional surveys, the fact that an independent market research contractor collects the response data from our tenants over the telephone and gives some numbers in terms of how many surveys were completed last year. And it also details what we do with the data, which includes data analysis, producing reports, dashboards, identifying trends, highlighting deficiencies in service delivery, measuring contractors' performance, and driving improvements from the Section 3 goes through the methodology that we use. We follow Housemarque STAR methodology, which is the leading framework for the UK housing sector. It also details the review of the methodology that was undertaken last year by Housemarque, details of the consultation, and when the new methodology was published, which we have now adopted since April, and we are now fully STAR compliant. It details the features of the new methodology, which includes the core questions, which are overall satisfaction, quality of home, satisfaction that the home is safe and secure, ease of dealing with the housing service, and responsive repair transactions. It also details the changes we've made to the response scale. We did have a 5-point scale, which was ranged from excellent, good, fair, poor, and terrible, or very poor, depending on the survey, which is now very satisfied, fairly satisfied, neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, fairly dissatisfied, and very dissatisfied. And it also goes through and details how the scores are actually calculated, so how we actually get to those percentage satisfaction rates. Section 4 of the report goes through the 2021 programme, which includes details of the satisfaction surveys being undertaken this year, which is expanded from last year. We're now going to be undertaking the satisfaction survey and complaints quarterly, so that's the new survey we're going to be completing this year. It tells how many completed interviews there have been so far this year. That was just for April. Satisfaction rate for April, which following from a strong performance last year. With the overall housing service in April was on target at 67%, with high levels of satisfaction with services like caretaking, grounds maintenance, repairs and servicing. And a high proportion of residents are also currently satisfied that their rent and service charges represent value for money as well, and that the housing team has brilliant. And section 5 details our intention to complete a full postal survey. So that details what we're planning to do and why we want to do it, including gaining insight from a greater number of residents, as we'll be able to access a greater number of residents at that time, at one single time, accessing a more representative reflection of residents' views, collecting data on a much larger question bank than telephone surveys allow. It also goes through that it also explains that the results will be result in a broader insight through analysis, and it will demonstrate a willingness of the housing team to listen to residents' views and build a better understanding of our residents' needs. It also details the questionnaire and what we're going to do surrounding the number of mailings of the questionnaire and the fact that there's going to be an online utility to complete a questionnaire online. We may want to do that. And that may encourage an even broader sample from different age groups to participate in the tenant satisfaction survey. And it also goes through how the bill will be provided to the council and what we do with it. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wendy, do we have anything from Lynn Mansfield?
Yes, we do, Chair.
Okay, you want to do those?
Yes, so she said the idea of the postal survey is brilliant. On the diagram on page 25, 3.4, a different response should have been given for the ratings of dissatisfaction between fairly dissatisfied and very dissatisfied. The response choices aren't clear or good. And then in 3.5, it was not clear, and she has asked more clarification on how the satisfaction rates are calculated. And then there's page 27's diagram. Lynn thought the percentage results were low and needed to be looked at in how these could be improved, particularly the last three. And in 5.4, she's also asked for clarification on the 2 questionnaires that will be sent out. So are both of these postal? And if so, why are 2 questionnaires needed? And or is one questionnaire postal and the other questionnaire online?
Okay, shall I start with the last one and we can work our way back to the first one?
Yeah, okay.
So it will be sent out twice, and the second mailing will only go to people who haven't already completed it. Quest will do all the analysis. They will know who has completed it. We will not know. It's not something that's reported back to us. It's entirely anonymous when it comes back to us. So that is why it's a chase up, basically. Right, I can't remember what the other 2 questions were. What were the other 2 questions, Wendy? Go back to the beginning again.
Okay. So it's for paragraph 3.4.
Oh, yes, yeah. So that is the new STAR methodology. In putting together the new methodology, Housemark, who are the owners of the STAR methodology, consulted widely with landlords and with 13,000 tenants, and there was a strong feeling that this was a more accurate way of expressing things. So, for example, one of the arguments that Chris and I have with our contractor colleagues sometimes is about the use, has been in the past about the use of the term fair. Fair is a word that in this case can be misunderstood and misinterpreted. People think fair means, oh, that was good, that's fair enough, that was, whereas we count it as a measure of dissatisfaction. So contractors don't like that. Whereas neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, you're much clearer about what you're saying. You're saying, I'm a bit meh about this. It wasn't really, neither one thing nor another. I'm really sitting on the fence. Whereas fair, people can think they're saying something quite good when they say something is fair. So that was something that came very strongly out of the consultation. The other thing that contractors sometimes say to us is, why don't you just have 4? Why don't you just have very satisfied, fairly satisfied, very dissatisfied, and very dissatisfied? Again, very strongly in the consultation, tenants were very opposed to that. They wanted to be able to say, actually, this is neither one thing nor another. They came back very strongly through the tenant consultation that having 5 was something that they really valued and they wanted to see continue. So that's why Housemarque did a big consultation on it, and this is what has come out of that consultation. And question number 2 from Lynn was?
It was paragraph 3.5. She's asked how the satisfaction rates are calculated.
Okay, that's one for Chris. He does all the numbers and calculating.
Okay, so that's a simple formula in terms of calculating a percentage. So I think the key point is that we only include very satisfied and fairly satisfied within that percentage satisfaction rate. So that percentage satisfaction rate, which for example is 75%. It's 75% of all tenants who have completed the survey have given a very satisfied or fairly satisfied rating. In a nutshell.
Okay, was that all of Lynn Mansfield's questions? I think it was, but there was a lot, so I'm just checking.
I think it was.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think it was.
There was one more she had said.
Okay.
It was page 27's diagram.
Yeah,
the results being low.
Okay, yes. Chris and I have talked about this, and this is something that we will get a greater amount of intelligence on from the full postal survey. It asks more questions that will allow us to dig into this. Although Lynn might feel that those are quite low figures, I think if we were to look at our peers, we would see that those were actually quite good figures. Certainly in other places that I have worked, we would have been ecstatic with some of those numbers. So it might seem low because some of the others are very high. We're getting 95, 92, 91% for things. Then only having 74.5 can seem a bit low. But actually, I think that I might get Chris to do some sort of benchmarking. I think a Housemarque could do quarterly benchmarking now, can't they? So we can look at that at the end of the first quarter and see where we are in comparison with what Housemarque calls our nearest neighbours, which is kind of statistically equivalent organisations.
Thanks, Sarah. Do any other councillors have any questions on this report? Put your hand up if you do. Councillor Abbas.
You're on mute, Councillor Abbas.
Councillor Abbas, you're on mute.
Sorry, I think it was me. I think, Chair, if I can remember correctly, she mentioned last week the mechanism we used in e-service. So how do we actually measure or check the quality of what the contractors are carrying on, or the invoice they are generating. Because if I can remember, it was Chair or someone else that did raise a question about repair, but she was charged with invoice for this. No? So the my concerns are these are tenants surveys. So what mechanism do we have to check the quality of by the council, like quality of work carried out by the contractors?
Okay, so each month we do a perception survey and satisfaction survey, which was what was reported in the previous report, with residents about their experience of the repair that they've had. So if you look back to the previous report, oh, is it in there? It is in there, isn't it? No, it's not in there. So we do ask them, and we ask them a series of questions. Are they satisfied with the repair? Was it done right first time? Was the did the operative show their ID? Did they clean up after themselves? Those sorts of things. So we ask a range of questions. The overall satisfaction figure is the one that we report. But also, at every core group meeting that we have monthly with our contractors, we go through those satisfaction results and we go through the comments. The residents have the ability to make comments, and Kpis will write them down. So we go through those comments. The MERS customer team will also speak to residents if they don't really understand what the comments are about, or to try and understand better what the failing has been if the tenant thinks we've done badly. And they will then make appropriate changes, maybe have a toolbox talk, maybe explain to the call centre that they need to do things differently, or look at our processes and procedures. So we go through them in a lot of detail at every core group meeting.
So don't have any mechanism to check ourselves the quality of work. We are just relying on customer feedback. That's what you're saying.
So I thought that's what you were asking me, Councillor Abbas, sorry. Do you mean, do we have post-inspections? Is that what you mean?
What mechanism we have checked, by us, like that, as a council, check the quality of work being carried out by these contractors rather than just relying on tenants?
Well, tenants are a very reliable measure of satisfaction, and they are very quick to tell us if they are not satisfied. But Chris, what's the percentage of post-inspections that we do? I don't remember off the top of my head.
I believe it's around 10%.
Yeah. So we do our surveyors and electrical and mechanical engineers do post-inspect things. They certainly do on the Transforming Homes programme. And they do on the responsive repairs as well, though obviously 31,000 responsive repairs a year, we can't check that many of them. But we do post-inspect a percentage, as Chris says.
I have just another question at 4.2. If you see the third one, that is very low. So if we cannot understand residents' needs, so how can we say we have met the kind of the quality of service, or we have what actually residents are asking? When this is very, very 61.5%.
Do you mean that the total of 535 tenants is very low?
No, at 4.2.
Yes.
Page 27.
4.2 is on page 26.
Sorry, page 27.
Okay.
If you see understands residents' needs, that's 69.5%. So my kind of what clarification I want is we can understand what the residents' needs are. So how are we going to deliver those?
Okay, well, as I said, that was one of the questions Lynn Mansfield asked. That might look very low to you, but actually for most landlords, I think that's probably quite a good result. We do have more people make comments on these as well, so we do have commentary that Chris is analysing and looking at to see if there are any trends and why people feel we don't understand their needs. So we are looking at that. Chris reports on that monthly to the management team. This is a new question, isn't it, Chris? Nod your head. Yes. So this is the first month that we asked this question in April. We'll also have, as I said before, a lot more information in the full postal survey. So I understand that the council hasn't done a full postal survey for some years, and it's a very, very useful tool because you get results from so many more people. So it gives you a much broader and deeper understanding of what's going on for residents. So that will also help. But Chris does have the commentary on those and does provide us with the trend analysis for the management team so we can pick up on those things. Chris, I don't know if you have anything you want to comment on that understands residents' needs specifically.
Only we full post survey will have a broader range of questions than we currently ask on our telephone satisfaction surveys, because the telephone satisfaction surveys they need to be much shorter surveys. So we'll have to ask a much broader range of questions, which will give us greater detail on that.
So, for example, if you take a different measure, which is like antisocial behaviour, at the moment we ask about people's satisfaction with the service for people who've used the service. In the postal survey, it asks a broad range of questions about littering, vandalism, noise, drug use, abandoned cars. It says, are these things an issue in your area? Yeah, I can't remember what the scale is, but that gives you much more information about what is it that's feeding a broader perception of antisocial behaviour. Is it that there's too much graffiti, there's too much littering? Is it noise nuisance? Is it drugs and drug dealing? So it gives you a much broader than we get in looking at people's satisfaction with the way their cases are handled. Gives us that's just the item I know I can remember the best. So that's one example of where you get to understand in a much broader way the way that residents feel about things through this survey.
Is that it, Councillor Abbas? Yes, okay. Councillor Piccolo Baker, do you have any questions? No raised hands? No? Okay. I just had two really quick ones. Oh, go on, Chris. Yeah, go on, Chris.
So I'm just a little bit muffled. I can't really hear Councillor Abbas for a little while ago, and Chris, I couldn't really make out. It's very, very muffled to me. Can you guys hear okay?
I can hear you, Chris, loud and clear.
Right. So you didn't get no mufflers with
I've got a little bit of breakout from Councillor Abbas, but I did have Chris okay.
I've missed quite a bit of that, but never mind. Obviously you all took it on board, but leave it at that for now, right?
Okay, let's see it improve, and hopefully, like the tech guys can. Councillor Piccolo.
Yeah, if I can just come in there. I was getting the same thing, but I found that if I put my speaker on mute, the sound quality improved from the people that are speaking, because I think what's happening is I was getting feedback from the speaker into the one that's trying to pick up what I'm saying. That's what was causing it. Since I've turned my speaker onto mute, when I've been just listening to the comments, I haven't had that muffling. Just as might be of help to the other councillor.
Well spotted, Councillor Piccolo. If we'll remember to mute when we're not speaking. Good. So, Councillor Abbas, if you finish, could you mute, please?
Councillor Morrell, I think you're muted.
Sorry, really quickly. Sorry, it's because I was being good, turning on to mute. So every 0.5, and we've got the 5 levels from excellent to very poor and terrible. Why do we only calculate using very satisfied and fairly satisfied? Why ask 5 questions if we only use the top 2?
Okay, so the reason we only use very satisfied and fairly satisfied is because those tenants are expressing clear that they're satisfied with the service that they've received for the particular measure that we're looking to measure. The neither satisfied nor dissatisfied is viewed as a neutral option. So the tenant isn't particularly isn't satisfied, and they're not dissatisfied, and they're kind of sitting on the fence in terms of their satisfaction. Whereas the fairly satisfied and the very dissatisfied answers to that question are expressing clear dissatisfaction. So the very and fairly satisfied are satisfaction answers. The neither is the neutral, and the dissatisfied answers are clearly dissatisfied. So they're the proportion of residents that are clearly satisfied with the service tips.
Roger, did you want to come in?
Just to reassure you, Chair, we do capture the information under each of those headings. It's just for the purposes of this. It's just for the purposes of this report that you only see in terms of the level of, I suppose, satisfaction from tenants within that housing management team. Particularly if we got a large chunk of people that were very dissatisfied, we would drill down into that. So it's only, you're only seeing the top two categories for the purpose of this report, but all the whole 5 are looked at in detail by the management team.
And in fact, that core group, we spend a lot more time focusing on dissatisfaction than we do on satisfaction. We want to go into what was it that went wrong? What was it that caused that resident to be dissatisfied with that repair? So we spend a lot more time, to the upset of some of our contractors, focusing on what went wrong there and what went wrong there, rather than, oh, didn't you do a good job there, there and there? So we really want to make sure they get it right the next time. And so do they, to be fair.
Would it not make sense for us to see that, though, so that we can see an improvement?
You should see an improvement. You are seeing an improvement, as laid out in the first report, in overall satisfaction with housing service. So you can see that we are, as a service, perceived better by our residents now than we were last year. Honestly, Councillor, there's so much of that stuff. I mean, you're looking at lots and lots of data. It's not really appropriate for this level of meeting. This is quite a high level strategic-y sort of meeting. It's not really appropriate for this kind of a meeting. It's very in-depth and detailed. That's why we go through it at core group with the contractors.
Okay, thank you. And how many surveys have we actually carry out in the year? So is the 535, that's not the full year, is it? That's not how many we've done in the year. Is that just like from March to April, or how many do we do a month, basically? Anybody want to answer, Chris?
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute. So it depends, really. We do around 200 general satisfaction surveys every month, maybe a little bit more. So that's the general perception survey for housing services. We also do about the same number of repair satisfaction surveys. We also do around, depending on the number of lets, we also do around 15 to 20 new tenant satisfaction surveys every month. And we also do a number, depending on the number of completions and services completed, we also do a number of past servicing and past repairs interviews each month. So it's hard to put an exact number on it, but it is around 500 a month, roughly, the number of satisfaction interviews across all types that we actually complete.
Okay, which is a fair number, which is good, really. And then just lastly, on this, the full postal survey, how quick will that turn around for you to number crunch it, turn it into a report? And then maybe we could have it on later in the year so that we can have a look at a wider survey.
We anticipate that it will take around 3 months to from end to end, so to actually complete the survey and crunch the numbers.
Okay, so could we get that on for the tail end of the year to have a look at that? It's on. Oh, okay, lovely. Thanks, Harold.
Sorry, Chair. Could I just say that Councillor Rector has just joined the meeting, just to point that out there, yeah?
Okay, thank you. Joy, can you hear us? Councillor Edsel?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Sorry, we had a power cut, so I have no idea where you are. My apologies.
Oh, okay. We're just agreeing item 6, which is
Okay.
the housing tenant and leaseholder satisfaction monitoring. So we just
Okay.
finished that. I don't know whether you had any questions on it or you want to just come in at the next
Yeah, I'll just
item.
carry on where you're on, Lynn. I did have questions from before, but it's my fault that I couldn't get on. So,
Okay. Are you sure you don't want to do anything?
what, going back?
Well, we've only got the housing one that's back, so we've only covered one.
Yeah, that was the one I just had a question on. That was all.
Okay. Well, I'm
Can I
sure.
ask that then, Lynn?
Absolutely, at my discretion, Joy, I shall allow that for you.
Good.
Since we're all sitting comfortably in our own homes this time.
Thank you. It's on page 17. All the feedback from, is it Carol that's answering this?
It depends. So I'll ask them one of them or
Yes,
delegate to one or the other.
Yeah,
Okay.
Councillor Edsel, I'll start by, I'll try.
Okay, it's just that I wanted to, there was a report last year with the analysis of the feedback from tenants. I just wanted a bit more clarity on what was it? You know, I know you've got questions of what you asked the residents, but there was nothing, I just need a bit more clarity in there if it's possible for next time.
Clarity on what? Sorry, Councillor Edsel, I'm being a bit dim.
I know you asked questions of residents. I'd just like to know more of what it was about.
Okay, so this particular paragraph relates to general satisfaction with the housing services, with the housing service.
Yeah.
So I can't remember how many questions we ask on that. It might just be the one, how satisfied are you with the service provided by Thurrock Housing Service? Have I got the words right even, Chris?
Yes, it's all right. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, you have.
And when people say no, they're not, as Chris has laid out here,
Yeah.
the key drivers for dissatisfaction, one of the key drivers is around lack of communication and engagement, and the other one is about people often call it repairs, but what they really mean is more like transforming homes items. When are my windows going to get done is one of the regular items that comes up. So as we move forward with external works on the Transforming Homes programme, we hope that people will feel more satisfied about the state of their windows in particular.
Yeah, no, that was what I wanted, Carol. Thank you very much. And thank you, Lynn, letting me come in.
You're welcome, Joy, and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, dear.
So nobody else has got their hand up, only you, Carol. You've got anything, or is that your hand coming back down again now? Was that you wanted to speak? That's it. Okay, so if nobody's got any other questions, are all members in agreement with recommendations outlined within the report on page 23?
Agreed.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Great. Okay, guys. So
Thanks.
moving on, we are moving on to item 7, which is the Housing Development Programme update on page 31 to 42. Can I ask Keith Andrews to introduce the report?
Chair, it might be me if that's okay. Can I talk?
You're welcome,
report,
David. You're
right?
welcome. You're welcome.
I'll do the introductory bit, and any hard questions we can pass straight on to Keith. I think that's the division of labour.
That works. Okay.
Okay. So this is a paper, Chair, just bring you back, if I can take you back to February. You'll remember that we had a paper here in your scrutiny committee previously where we talked you through the list of sites that the council was going to put onto what's called a housing development options list. And it was discussed in your scrutiny meeting on the 11th of Feb and then taken to Cabinet on the 12th of Feb. And the list was agreed. And as part of that process, we agreed that we would bring updates about the list back to your scrutiny meeting to update members about progress and say that's on a regular basis. So this is really what this paper is doing. It's updating you on the progress that's taken place on the sites on the list. Although, to be very honest, there's not been a great deal because of COVID-19 and various other factors. But it is updating you, as you'll see from the recommendations, actually, it's quite clear in the recommendations that it's noting the progress of what's happened. Secondly, it's noting and commenting on the proposal to add a further site to the list, which is a site at Riverview, which is in Chadwell St Mary, at not Corringham, as I'm afraid it does say in a typo in the paper on paragraph 3.3. Sorry, paragraph 3.4. And it's also talking about adding in or removing 5 sites which are listed in recommendation in paragraph 1.3, Callan Grove, Bridgewell Avenue, Derry Avenue, Garran Lane, Humber Avenue, Springhouse Road from the list. So that's really the point. I guess talking through the rest of the paper very briefly, paragraph 3.3 and 3.4 gives you an update, which is talking about the programme will still deliver just over 700. In point of fact, it's 703 homes plus 5 from the Riverview site, which brings it to 708. In paragraph 3.5, it's just worth bearing in mind we're not asking members of the committee to make any decision about the planning or endorsing it from a planning point of view. It's just a list of sites that we're looking to carry out further investigations into to see if they can be brought forward for further consultation with residents. So that's almost all I wanted to say on the paper, but happy to take any questions. And other than to refer you back to the recommendations, which are asking members of your committee to note and comment on A, the progress, B, the addition of 1 site, and C, the removal of 5 sites from the list. Thank you, Chair.
Wendy, do we have anything from Lynn on this?
Yes, we do. So Lynn said Riverview site was good and that Chadwell has infrastructure that's already there. She was pleased to see the removal of the 5 sites listed. And regarding Broxburn Drive in the site options list, as well as the other sites on the list, she's asking what type of dwellings would be on the site, because the site, particularly for Broxburn Drive, is quite small and would be difficult to fit 60 dwellings on a site. Would these dwellings be flats, or would these be high-rise or low-rise flats? Thank you.
Okay, through you, Dan. I'm probably going to ask Keith to pick up the difficult one, in that he's got the detail or more detailed knowledge than I have. What I would say before I hand over to Keith is that these are indications. You understand that this is just what we think might go onto the site from a very brief architectural study. So we haven't yet finalised the designs of the site. That's why we haven't gone out to consultation on these. But Keith, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Thank you. Yeah, Chair. The only sort of forms of development we're looking at potentially on there would be some low-rise flats and some houses. Clearly, as Dave points out, there's quite a bit of work to do to work through that yet, but that's what we've currently got, and that's what forms the basis of the units that go into the option list.
Was that it from Lim? Yes. Anybody else want to put their hand up?
Yes, please. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah. Thank you, Carl.
Really, regards Broxburn Drive, like looking at the 60 units, that being up with the garages on, Dave? The garages.
Again, shall I answer that? So yes. I mean, there's some garages that run along parallel to the railway at the rear of there. And there's some scope for development potentially within that. There's also potential for some other infill or maybe even extensions of existing blocks. So there's a lot of work to do, as I say, in terms of working up something that's ready to go out and to be consulted on. And we're not yet at that stage. But those initial thoughts, you're right, that's the area where those garages are, particularly at the rear of the site.
Okay, thank you.
It's garages and infill, isn't it? Describes it on the housing list, I think.
Regards Emborn, can you hear me all right, Dave?
Yes, I can hear you, Councillor. Yeah.
Emborn Green, do we know where we're going to go with that one, or are we still waiting?
Emborn, I think that one is. I
That's
think
again.
Still, go on, Keith. You've got the details.
Okay, so again, this one in that location, still we've appointed architects. We still need to do some studies on that. The numbers of units that would if this site were to progress in the way that it's been considered at the moment, would be houses. But there's we're not ready yet to go out for consultation on that one. We've got to do some more architecture work so that we have something to show people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Roy, did I see your hand up? I can see your fingers. You're on mute, Joy. Yep, you're in. And Councillor Abbott, I've got you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to mention I couldn't think of a Riverview in Corringham, but I'm glad Stuart sort of was right on that. It definitely is Chadwell. Only to ask on remaining sites that's on Appendix B, we're still going out to community engagement on all those sites.
Through you, Chair, yes. I mean, the answer is yes. There on the sites in appendix, the list that's in Appendix B, there's 15 sites. Yeah. Plus you add in Riverview, that gives you 16 on that site, on that list. So at the moment, we are still working up all of those sites. The next stage, once we've got the sites worked up, then there will be a process of consultation. But as you're about to hear in the next, obviously the consultations have been paused and hampered a little bit because of COVID-19 and difficulties with getting people into a place where we can sensibly consult. But the process of consultation is still to go forward on those, what will be 16 sites on the list. That's correct.
Lovely. Thanks, David. That's brilliant. Thank you, Lynn.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question, it's just a clarification at 3.3, page 32. You have said we will deliver now just 703 homes, a reduction of 222 homes. So will we deliver these remaining 223 in the future, or the final list would be 703?
So, Councillor, if you look at the following paragraph, of course, we've got 3.4 says it'll take it up to 708. How 708 is the list from the 16 sites, if you include Riverview. And of course, this is a fluid process. You know, one of the reasons that we bring an update back to Scrutiny is that if there are more sites that come forward, we'll bring those to you. And if there are, if there should be any more reductions, we'll report those back to you as well. So this is trying to keep you as members up to date on the latest set of sites. So we've clearly got housing targets that we need to reach, and that suggests that's not reaching that target. So we've got to try and find more sites and bring those forward. But part of the consultation and engagement process that we've set up is to make sure that you as members and actually the residents are aware of this as quickly as possible. And equally, the process is, we hope, a more transparent process. And if people have got objections, and we can hear those objections more quickly, and it means that we can move on to other sites if that's appropriate, and not waste a lot of time and money developing sites only for it to be aborted at a later stage. Well, that answers your question, Councillor. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have just like another question. On your appendix, you have mentioned these Appendix B, some sites. But even I did raise even in my last meeting, why we are just identifying these sites on west of the borough? Aren't we looking at anything on the east of the borough, to find some sites there, because why we are just keep building on the west of the borough?
Okay, it's a good question, and I think it's one of the issues is you'll be aware we're looking at the local plan. There's difficulties. There are currently difficulties on building on green agricultural sites, and part of the work that's going on across the council on the local plan is to try and identify sites and make it easier to build on sites. And unfortunately, it's the nature of the borough. You're aware of the split. Most of the housing is on that's the current side that we're looking at, and the spaces that we're looking at, and the other part of the borough is greener, and it's much more difficult to build on those areas. So I think probably, as I've answered in previous scrutiny, I mean, I think over time that will even itself out as the local plan will allow us to build in different areas. But at the moment, it's there's a whole process that we go through to try and identify sites, and unfortunately, a lot of the activity is in the sites that are currently built up, as we're looking at brownfield sites or open space sites, and that's just where the focus of this has been. Okay, Councillor.
Is that all you've got, Councillor Bess? Councillor Piccolo?
I think you're on mute, Councillor Piccolo.
Yeah, no. It keeps bobbing up and down, trying to take me off mute. No, I think on the whole, I'm happy with the report. I haven't been on. I'm only sitting as a substitute, so I haven't got any history of what's gone on. But have we gone out? To my thinking, I haven't seen anything like this in previous years, where we've gone out to get people's opinion even before we decide to go out to get like planning permission or approval. Is this a new step so that we don't waste time in proceeding with something which at the end of the day isn't going to be or the residents can come up with a good reason why something doesn't happen there?
I think that's absolutely right, Councillor. It's as I tried to suggest before. What we're trying to do is is for this to be a more transparent process, to try and give both residents and members a greater sight a greater vision of the sites that we're trying to look at, and it's trying to give residents more chance to object to things. And in a way, the last thing you want for residents is if you have a site that you suddenly find out that you've got a scheme developed, it's coming into planning, and you've got a few weeks almost before somebody starts building on your site. So what we're trying to do now is to try and update residents about these sites we're investigating. And to be fair, we have seen there's a lot of reaction from residents, and so it gives us the opportunity to look at the sites. In a previous way of looking at it, we'd have spent more time and effort and money developing schemes, and if they were to be stopped, then that money is lost to the council. So we hope it's a more transparent and a more effective and possibly a cheaper way of trying to bring sites forward.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I mean, I think it is. I think in some instances, residents have thought in those particular areas, and you've heard the saying many times, it's a done deal, it's all going to go ahead. I think because this is a new stage, which is prior to all that, I think some residents have taken it wrongly and assumed that that's what's going to happen. And I think we possibly need to get across to them that they've still got the same opportunities they would have had, but they actually now got more time to consider their responses if it should go into planning. So no, but thanks for clarifying that point. I was getting a little confused as to whether or not this was a new, as I thought it was a new procedure beforehand, and I welcome it.
It is, yeah.
There's no other councillors got anything before I ask my questions? No? Okay, right, I'm going to kick off with mine then. So can you confirm that the 5 sites that have been removed to date will not return on the long list at a later date?
They've been taken off the list, Chair, so that's it.
They're gone. Completely, forever gone. Thank you.
I can't give you forever. They're taken. Who knows what will happen in 20, 30, 40 years time, but they're off the list, so they won't be.
They're off this current programme while we have this housing development programme. They won't come back again. Thank you. And in line with so 3.1, in line with the council's consultation strategy, which we had, and it runs right through the council. Can you tell us, tell the committee, what criteria allowed the 4 sites to be removed by the cabinet member? The other sites that are the same criteria remain the same. So I'm looking at Emborn is an open green space that's part of that wider community that people have been using for COVID. The same area, the same green space, the same resources. And we've also got what's called Manor Road, which according to the council key criteria is that we wouldn't use green open spaces. So open spaces need to be of poor quality and no longer required, yet it's still on the list. So these are the two that I've really got some problems with, because obviously Emborn's exactly the same as the two that were taken off by the portfolio holder. And I welcome them all coming off. There's no problem about that. And the house is coming off as well. But I just don't see why they differ from the other when I want to know what in the consultation process allowed them to come off.
So in a way, it's not actually this paper, because it's not part of the consultation process in a way. It's actually going back to the previous paper that was brought when we're talking about the housing development process. And I think it's the portfolio holder's decision to take sites off the list. So that's, you know, and he, I think, has listened to the members and the residents who've contacted him. I understand that's how he's taken his decision, but that's really his decision. The process that we've got does allow the sites to be taken on and taken off. If you remember going back to the previous paper in, I think it was November, that came back to you when we originally spoke about the housing development process. We've been through a list of criteria that will allow us to look at different sites, and as you say, it's the open space ones that weren't being used. And the sites have been through a number of different criteria. That's why they're on the current list. And then we're just going through this process where we will do the investigations. We listen to residents as we go out, and if the portfolio holder decides that they don't want to take forward, or if we would make a recommendation that say the site doesn't stack up financially, or it would work for various reasons, despite where we've got to, then those sites could be taken off the list. But again, it's the portfolio holder's decision to take them off the list.
So can you confirm that what you're saying, that it don't matter that we're going to agree in a consultation process, the portfolio holder can just randomly take sites on and off the list?
Well, I think they're two things, aren't they? I mean, this paper is talking about a consultation process where we're talking about how we'll take things out to the residents, and so that's what we're doing. So I think that's the purpose of this paper.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Warren, we've lost you.
Sorry, it also says in the paper that the long list will be at 3.10 on page 38, that the long list of sites for development is intended to be an annual process with lists of sites being reviewed each year by ONS and approved by Cabinet. So we went to ONS, we went to Cabinet, we had it agreed, the Cabinet member said this is the list, and before we get to the next meeting, it's took another 4 sites off, but left other sites on that meet the same criteria. I don't see what the difference is in the criteria of taking some off and putting some on, other than he's the councillor for the ward and he lives in the upper ward. So, you know, I just think it's about fairness and making sure that there's a level playing field for all of our residents. So I just don't know how it fits the consultation. The council's got a consultation process. Why are we going to agree a consultation process tonight when someone can come in and go, actually, I'm just going to take that one off because my residents have talked to me?
So I think it does end paragraph 3.9 on page 38. Any significant changes to the sites on the agreed list will be made in consultation with the portfolio holder, with significant changes being reported back to Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And so that's what I think, that's my understanding of the process. You know, I can't really comment on how portfolio holder wants to take a decision. I think it does say somewhere else in it, and that appendix is actually the appendix the information I was referring to when it came to your Scrutiny Committee in, I think it was November. That was that's a cut and paste from the housing development process that we put in place. So
I can see that it went to I can see
Cabinet
that
in January.
yeah, so it was agreed by cabinet. This is the
Yes.
process, and yet
Yeah.
it's not been followed. So I'm just really disappointed, that happened. Also, does it all, on the list? So we've got the long list. So how many of the sites, which are now 16, how many of them will be social housing, and how many of them will be TRL? So
Okay.
we've got to build 500 council houses. This is what it's all about, building 500 council houses. How many of these are council houses and how many are TRL?
Okay, I'll bring Keith in shortly on this one, but at this stage we haven't defined any schemes for any of the sites in finite detail, so we don't know the absolute numbers on this. But I don't know if Keith, if you can add anything more. I mean, we've got council guidelines on affordable houses and things like that, but perhaps you can bring a bit more detail.
Okay, of course. So the general principle that we would adopt is that if land is currently held within the housing revenue account, we would anticipate that all of the homes built on that land would end up as council homes within the housing revenue account. If there is land in the general fund, then the expectation is that that would be potentially offered to TRL, and the council's planning policy would require 35% of any homes built by TRL, as any sort of private sector developer would be obliged to provide that proportion as affordable housing. So what I haven't got in front of me is a straight breakdown. If I took those principles, I can certainly do that and come up with some numbers. However, what we do know is that, of course, TRL having its own board would need to wish to take on sites. We can't prejudge that. There may well be sites that are held in the general fund, for example, that TRL will not wish to take out and develop. So we're in a very much matter of conjecture at the moment. But if you wish, Councillor, separately, I could simply do that calculation in making those big assumptions that those principles of land use lead through to those various different areas of delivery.
Yeah, I think that would be really useful for us as a scrutiny committee to see how many council houses we're going to get out of this, and the proportion of how many of TRL will be social housing rather than private housing.
But I think I can show that all the proportion of TRL homes that would be affordable housing would be 35%. That's the obligation within the planning policy, and that would be most likely a condition of disposal that members would have to agree. So I think that element is fairly clear. I can say with confidence that that would be the requirement, subject to the cabinet report agreeing that disposal. For the rest of it, so we can make assumptions on what we know now in terms of the land position, whether it's held in the housing revenue account or the general fund. But as I say, there's a lot of other factors that will come into play with that, not least the fact that TRL has its own decision-making powers.
Okay, and where are we with the Culver site? I can see that the architects are going in now, but that's still, is it agreed that, have they agreed that it can be transferred over now?
Sorry, Councillor, by who transferred? Do you mean the council agreeing to transfer it to TRL?
No, don't we have to get Secretary of State?
Right, yeah.
Approval?
Yes, we do indeed.
Where are we with that?
Okay, but that's been going backwards and forwards. They're continuing asking for different information. So as we speak, it's not currently agreed
Right.
at the moment.
Right, okay. But you do expect it to? And council will get best price for that, the transferring of our land?
I think there's two questions there. So every indication is that, yes, the Secretary of State will agree. Clearly, it's not done until we actually have that notification. And in terms of the valuation for the land, that will have to be agreed as part of the cabinet decision at such point that the council decide to sell land to TRL, and it will be on the terms agreed at that cabinet report.
Is it a cabinet decision or does it have to come to council?
I believe it's council. Sorry, I believe it's cabinet.
Does cabinet don't have to come through to council?
I'm sure Wendy can talk me through the democratic processes, but yes, I mean, that's the first point of call. Is my understanding it goes to cabinet.
Okay,
and
just
decisions
check
made
that
there.
because I was led to believe that it has come to council because it's disposing of the land. But if you can just check that.
Yeah, it's of course, yeah, that way just confirming whatever in our constitution back to you, and I was happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. And the report talks about the pipeline list. Would it not be more open? We're talking about being open and transparent with residents and putting sites in front of them. But the sites that we've got have already been through the 3Rs, they've been through Despot, they've had surveys done, yet they're still coming off. Would it not be like more open and transparent and may well sort of fit in with where Councillor Abbas was saying? We had a longer pipeline and said, actually, this is all of our sites. And these are where we could go. And also, is there a way for councillors to feed in where they think that there's a bit of land? I've certainly got land that I know of that I think should be in the pipeline, but I don't know whether you're looking at it not, because whilst you're being open and transparent, it's not fully open and transparent.
Okay, well, let me pick up that last bit first, Chair. If you've got sites, if there are sites that you think we should be looking at, we'd be very happy to talk to you about them. And if there are sites you want to suggest to us, then by all means we can have a look at those sites and start to bring them through. But I'll take you back to the process. I mean, it's not just trying to look at any plot of land, but it's looking at the land that we've got that meets the criteria in the thing that we've been through, and making sure that there's no other uses for it. So that would be the process we take it through. There are other bits of land in the borough that the council owns, and you know, we've, rather than getting everybody in the borough you know, excited and saying, no, you can't develop on our plot of land, what we're trying to do is to filter this and say, look, there are some of these sites that we need to do a little bit of work and you know, to try and draw a sketch around, look at some of the basic numbers, see if it works as a basic site, and do the initial work. And I'm sure we mentioned this at the last scrutiny meeting, and trying to talk you through that process and saying there are a number of sites that we're looking at once we're satisfied that they're genuine sites and it's viable to try and build on those sites. That's when we try and bring it forward and let residents know. And so we're trying to filter the process rather than having this, you know, rather than saying to every single resident in a borough almost that, look, we're developing on a site near you. We're trying to say these are the sites where we think there's a good chance that we might be able to develop, or we might want to investigate further. And then it's at that early stage that we're taking it out to residents and saying, look, these are the sites that we're now investigating. We're just, the alternative, we've only got a small team, and I'm trying to be practical as well, we've only got a small team of people that are trying to look at all of these sites. And if we have, instead of 15 sites across the borough, if there were, you know, 59 or 60 or 100 or 200 sites, we just wouldn't have enough people to investigate all of those sites and to bring them forward. So it's trying to manage the resources we've got effectively, as well as trying to be as transparent to local residents as early as possible.
Okay. Okay. Well, I've just been at there's sites that could be used much better than green space. I'm going to stay with my open green space.
Okay. We're happy.
Yeah. I'll just finish mine, Joy, and then I'll bring them in. I've got a couple more first. You know, on the list of sites, number 12 is down as Manaway. Could we please mark that as Elm Road Park? Because that is actually Elm Road Park, it isn't Manaway. The site where you're looking to develop here is actually the back of our park, where the council have put 300 new tree saplings in, and the community have their man shed down there. It's a well-used park. This makes it sound just like it's a road. It's not. It's an open green space park that's used 365 days a year. So you can leave Manway, but just write Elm Road Park there. And also the other one is Bridge Road. Is that not Richmond Road where the Scout Hut is? So should it not say Richmond Road, because it's where the Adult Education Centre, isn't it? So so you go down into Richmond Road and not Bridge Road, because you've got you have a 50-foot drop if you're going to come the other way.
Keith, I'm sorry to drop on you. You know the sites better than I do, I'm afraid. You're on mute, Keith.
Sorry, I think I muted myself and did it straight back on. We've shown the red lines in the infographics and the reports that came forward previously. I am very happy to change and update the names that are shown on the appendix, so it shows greater clarity. I see no difficulty in that at all, because frankly we've been quite open in giving the infographics what of the red lines that we looked at. So I'm happy to make those additions.
Okay, thank you. Because I don't think Manor Road even sits in the Groves Ward. I think it sits in the Little Thurrock Ward, doesn't it, Joy? Yeah, it sits in Little Thurrock. Yeah, it's not even the Grays Ward. So, you know, to use our park and call it something else doesn't quite feel fair. And lastly, I have got a question about, are there any sites that are due to go to consultation very soon? Within, like, between now and the next scrutiny meeting? And when do you expect the first planning application to go in that gives us some tangible outputs from this whole process?
Keith, can you update on the next plan, the next process, the next planning application? I guess Culver is one of the closest to the next stage, isn't it?
It is indeed in the Culver Centre, where we've been through two rounds of consultation. Then that will be the first of those. I think that one, and potentially in the site led by Adult Social Care, which is the Whiteacre site. Yeah. I think that could be on a similar trajectory, maybe even in advance of the Culver Centre. I think those are likely to be the first two we'll see a planning application submit for.
And just one really quick last one before I bring Joy in. The civic offices development, is that dependent on us building the flats the other side? Will we get those civic offices if we don't sell the other bit of the old, you know, the bit where they're going to build the flats for sale? Is the new civic offices dependent on definitely building flats in the other area?
I'm not sure I follow the question. Sorry, Councillor. The new office development is civic offices 2. Yeah. And the scheme that we've got in here is what's called Civic Offices 1, which is currently the bit of the building where the council chamber is. Right. You know, it's as you go into the main doors, it's on the right hand side. It's that older bit of the building. That's what we're calling CO1, Civic Offices 1, and it's that bit that we're suggesting is in the housing scheme, because as people move out of that CO1 building, and effectively we've got the council chamber and there's a few offices in there at the moment, but not many. The majority of the staff are moving over into CO2, and in fact, I think are in CO2. So that's CO1 as the new site is developed on CO2, then that building becomes redundant. So that site can be the current plans are for that site to be demolished and to be put in to be redeveloped as housing. That's what the scheme's currently focused on.
TRL housing. So will that money go in to pay for that more housing, or will it go into like fill the gap in of the £10 million that we're paying to our new civic office?
So that's quite a convoluted question, I think. But in terms of I think it's my understanding of this is that what we're trying to do with the CO1, there's a scheme there's a scheme for the CO2 building which is being developed and that's moving forward. The scheme for CO2. CO1 is for the housing scheme. So I can't off the top of my head think if there's cross subsidy, but I know we're currently looking at a number of options. The CO1 building, for example, is currently being submitted in the what we're currently considering putting forward to the Future High Street Fund to try and find some additional funding, that funding is geared up towards housing. So there's a gap in the funding amount that we've got to try and develop it as housing. But that's about. I don't know. I'm not sure that we've decided that's necessarily TRL housing or what yet. So it's an early stage on CR1 at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Right, Joy, that's my questions. If you want to come in now.
Yes. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, can.
Yeah, sorry about that. Lynn's picked up on a couple of things. Obviously, as councillors, we know where these areas are. So we know roughly they're not in the wards they're supposed to be, where, you know, what they're put on as in the sites you've put out. I'm not getting at officers, don't think that, David, Heath, but I think sometimes officers have got to join members into finding the right names for the areas they're in. And we've obviously got one coming to planning which they don't know what ward it's in. It's in the middle of somewhere. So I think that happens. So Lynn's picked up on a couple of those. Lynn, just to pick up on what you said about site specific, once site specific comes to our members, comes to officers, site specific, we have been asked, I think it was last year, we were asked to, if we picked something from wherever we know is land they can use, but when it comes to site specific, will still be entered into, members will still be able to say something on those site specific. So I think that works out the same as it always has done. You know, it's we can still have our say on the site specific that's coming up. So, but I think it most of us will say that if we see a site in our ward which is we think can be used, I think the officers would take it on board. You know, that we've come up with a site that may be ideal. So I just wanted to put that in, Lynn, you know, that we will have, if it's once it's site specific in the plan, in the development plan, then we can have our say on site specific. So that's all I wanted to say, Lynn.
Thanks, Joy.
You're welcome.
I can't see anybody else that wants to come in.
I'd just say, Chair, just to, sorry.
Yeah,
it's just apologies if we get the names wrong. We do try to get these places right, and you can just blame me. I'm from Liverpool, live in Manchester, so it's my geography. Local geography is bad.
Didn't know where Chadwell and Corringham were. That's fully understandable.
No, I hold my hand up and apologies for that. But it's we do try hard to try and get it right, and you know, so it's, if it's wrong, we apologise, and it does go in front of members. We do. This is the reason, as Keith said, we put the plan out there, so it's trying to help members understand where it is. So we will keep trying to get it right. Apologies if we haven't.
Thanks, Keith.
No. Thanks for that, David. So for me, so just to sum up before we agree, it's the removal of, you know, like removal at noted at 3.1 and forming the recommendation at 1.3. You know, this was at the discretion of a cabinet member, and it took off green spaces, yet let others on. I haven't got a problem with any of the other sites and how we take them forward, and we will get the say, but I just don't see that there's any difference in Emborn Green as there is for the other ones. So just by using these, that just makes me, you know, it's only the green sites, you know, and it makes me lose the, you know, for people to even be worrying that living in Emborn and on that park site, you know, they've still got that same worry. So, you know, I agree that the list is the list and we're not being asked to agree anything. I just want it noted that, you know, I'm not influencing anybody else. I just want the minutes to carry on noting that I do not agree that green spaces forming part of the list of the housing development, and I'll do my best, you know, to carry on to get them all the way through to consultation and planning. And because I think that once we all done our green spaces, they're on, and that really worries me. But other than that, I'll take the recommendation. Does everybody agree with the recommendation? set out in the report on page 31 to 42.
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank
Agreed.
you. Right, we are now moving on to item 8, which is the housing development consultation process on page 43 to 54 of the report.
And if it's okay, Chair, I'll probably take you through this one, and then again, as before, any tricky questions are straight over to Keith.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this paper again is it's referring back to the previous papers. This one goes directly back to the report that you saw at your scrutiny in October last year, which outlined the housing development process. And they did go on to Cabinet in January 2020. And this report outlines the consultation element of the housing development process. So this is just focusing on the consultation bit. And as you go through the paper, Chair, if I can take you down to paragraph 3.5, this is where it sets out the guiding principles for the consultation process. And you can see just over the page on page 45, I think it is, this is a series of bullet points. And so this is talking about trying to make sure that members are aware and briefed on projects ahead of each phase. So you should know that it's you find sure this is making sure that the chair of scrutiny, portfolio holder, and the ward members are aware of what's happening on a site. And it's trying to make sure that the approach is proportionate. There'll be some sites where there's less activity because it's smaller, and some sites where the scale, complexity and sensitivity are much bigger and greater. We are, as we mentioned earlier in the meeting, we're trying to get this engagement much earlier in the design development process. And as we discussed earlier, so communities can, members of the community can get their views in early at what's really a formative stage rather than the late stage of the development of schemes. The paper also talked about making the consultation, the engagement process easily accessible for communities. And there's a commitment to encourage participation for everybody, trying to use plain English and trying to use a variety of tools to reach all sectors of the community. And we do also say that we will try and make sure that people, when we get the feedback from consultation, we'll feed that through in a clear sort of you said we did approach, so it's easy to understand. And there were some examples of that earlier when we went out to consultation on the Culver Centre, and we fed back some of the results from that, and members of the community have seen that there were changes to the original plans that were put out, and taking things forward to the final stage. So just whizzing through again, paragraph 7, 3.7, sorry, talks about identifying who should be contacted and how we go through this process, down to paragraph 3.13, which talks about the sort of the time scale. Now, if we're almost working back from an event here, so when we're planning an event, we'll start work on this at least 6 weeks beforehand, and then we'll talk the portfolio holder through this at least 3 weeks beforehand, and then 2 weeks beforehand we'll speak to you as chair of the scrutiny committee and to local ward councillors to make sure that everyone's briefed and understand what's going on. And in paragraph 3.15, there's a range of tools that can be used to try and brief and to talk to residents, and it's not just the standard processes. You'll see at the bottom there's some of the bottom paragraphs, that's possible bullet points. Yeah, there are different ways that we're trying to look at contacting people, and paragraph 3.16 talks about the impact of the coronavirus and how everyone's suddenly become an expert in Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams and take on these new technologies. And so it's trying to find ways around this in the current lockdown circumstances in which we find ourselves. So it's talking you through that. And then finally in paragraph 3.17 and 3.18, it's recognising that there are different parts of the community might be harder to reach. So we're happy to look at things like phone, postal and web-based communication to try and speak to people, just to try and manage the social distancing as needed. And so the paper also talks about the monitoring and feedback that I've mentioned earlier. We'll do it on a use as we did basis. And that's broadly it, I think, Chair. Just to take you back to recommendation of paragraph 1.1, which is to ask if members of Scrutiny have any comments on the proposed consultation process.
Do we have anything from Lynn on this, Wendy?
Yes, there is. So she said Appendix A was good, but the process would be too long and it may be difficult to keep the interest that's there from other people. She thought Appendix B's process would be more sufficient. And then once the consultation process is over, how long will it be before building works commences? And the leaflets are good in Appendix B and at the end of Appendix B, but it would be ideal to have more drop-in sessions. And that's it.
Okay.
Okay, shall I try and take those?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
Absolutely.
recognise that there will be a range of complexity, a range of scale, and that's why we're suggesting that there needs to be a consultation process that's proportional to the size and complexity. And so I accept that Lynn's point that the Appendix A for the two-stage process is lengthy, but it's our view that it enables the community to have early views and engagement, and then we can go back with a second a stage that allows the community and residents to say, okay, we can see how you've responded and changed, but we had some further comments. And we think that's all right, very right and proper. And I think this is the approach we took when we put forward the Culver Centre project. And so I think that's appropriate to have different sizes and timescales for different teams. So that's one. Sorry, I didn't jot down the second part of the question, Wendy. Can you just remind me of that?
Yeah, she's the second part was how long would it be before building work commences?
Oh, of course. Okay, that's a very tricky one to answer. We know that there's likely to be, after a consultation process, there will be the need to refine and work projects up further to get to a planning application. That may be a number of months. It could be 3, 4, 5 or more months, but that would be a reasonable sort of time scale. The planning process itself, if it goes without hitch and is approved at first proposal, that's likely to be up to 3 months if it's a large application. Following that, there's the matters around tendering and the constructor start on site. So I would say, it's a bit how long that a string. We're possibly talking 18 months would not be timescales that would be unreasonable, but it will vary site to site and project to project.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair, Keith. I think it's the key bit now is it's proportional really, and it just depends on the scale and size of the site and what have you. So it's we'll try and, I think it's very helpful outline in terms of timescale. I hope that's okay, Chair. But you appreciate it will vary site to site.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to say on this process? Joy? We can't hear you, Joy.
I think you need to unmute.
Now.
Yeah. Sorry,
Dave.
Yeah.
To say that probably we are trying to be open and transparent. I think it's really good. I think the report is good. Is this, with the pandemic we're in at the moment, because it's not going to end anytime soon, is it really? We're still going to be in, it's going to be very awkward for you as officers to do what you're doing. Is this going to put a lot of this stuff back, David, a little bit?
Well, I think that's it's fair to say that there are probably about 6 sites already that we would have been going out to consultation with residents at various different stages, not final consultation, but some of the work that we're doing. So there has been an impact on at least 6 sites that we're aware of. And you might argue that, you know, if those had been going forward, the other sites as well would be nearer. You know, so there has been a delay on the impact that's undoubtedly due to not being able to get out and consult with people.
Sorry, Lynn, can I just come back quickly?
Of course you can, Joy.
Just saying that a lot of where we're trying to get to people on Zoom and Skype and everything else, there are a lot of people out there, and I know Lynn knows I do labour this quite often. We've got. I
know what you're going to say.
I knew what I was going to say. They haven't got that technology.
Yeah.
You know, we have, and it does make it awkward. If there's something that we can get out, have we got anything that we can send out to them to let them fill in to come back, which may help those sort of people who haven't got the technology we've got.
Yeah. Can I respond, Chair, through you?
David, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. It's just this is where we were talking about. There's almost a toolkit of different tools we can use to try and consult people, and in some cases it might be letters and phone calls, and you know we have considered whether we actually we can almost send people out, and Keith was explaining how another local authority has actually got. You almost send a grid map out to people, talk about the schemes, and then you phone people up individually, and it's almost like playing battleships. I don't know if you, it's probably me, I used to play as a child, you know, and you've got grid references and you can talk to people about the schemes and talk to people that way. It's a bit more labour intensive, but some local authorities are doing it. So it's an option that we could consider if we're prepared to go out and open up the process and allow us to consult with people again.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. Has anybody else got anything? Kerry?
Right, should I be muted now? Yeah, no, I like the idea of the 2 different processes that we can go through, because there will be some sites that are complex, and we'll need to give residents more time to organise, to object to it if they've got an objection to it. And the 4-stage process in Appendix A, I think is suitable for that type of big site. But then again, I can understand the need for a shorter consultation process, but where the site is possibly not as controversial and there aren't. So I appreciate the fact that we're not trying to find one cat fits all. We've actually looked at the 2 separate types of problems that we've come across. And we've given the residents the opportunity to give more time to prepare for when they do, if they do want to put an objection in. So I appreciate the 2-stage proposal. Thank you. That's it.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah. Nobody else. I actually think it's a very good paper. And I think that it covers most of the bases. But I would also echo that. In different times and as we come out of this, it shouldn't be digital or face-to-face. I think that when we come out of this and we can be face-to-face, we need to make sure that we do go face-to-face. So if they do start to unlock it, we can possibly get a gazebo or a wider space or the civic hall. We've got plenty of buildings, you know. If people want to travel to have their say, they will. The civic offices, the reception in the front, High Street, anything. You know, if we begin to unlock, I'd like to see that we get a little bit imaginative about getting back and speaking. You know, there's very likely that we can be within 1 metre of each other within. I don't want to go within 1 metre of anybody, but you know that's what they made them for. But I do think that as we roll out of this, I'd like to see the face-to-face start again. But I do welcome, and somewhere like an old garage site that's been really old and it's issues, and we know that we can build on it. You know, it's just an unused space. Why go through the long process when we can go through the short process? So I absolutely agree that we are got on with the process, but would say that it needs to be once something gets to consultation or on that list. You know, I'd like it to be that we go through the process to remove anything or add anything. You know, you can't just say, oh, I don't want that on there no more, when it's been in the public domain for 8 months. It just demeans the whole process when you don't follow it, and it's not, you know, the same for everybody. But other than that, I think that the process and the document is good. So yeah, well done for those that made up on it.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so nobody else got anything else? So I am going to read the recommendations. Everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, so then we are getting there, people. Just a couple more. Item 9, which is a report on housing social value report on page 55 to 60, which Sue Cardozo will introduce. Sorry, Sue, you've sat there all that time.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Hope you can hear me all right. So this report just gives us an outline of the social value framework that we use in our housing contracts, and it also gives an update on the recent benefits and performance. It doesn't outline everything we've done. We've done many things over the years. I've just honed in on examples and recent performance. So just as a little bit of background, in 2012, there was the Public Services Social Value Act, and that gave us a requirement to consider social value in every public sector procurement. And obviously in housing, with our stock, we make a considerable investment in the ongoing maintenance of the housing stock, and that gives us a big opportunity to achieve additional value for the residents of the borough. How we do it in housing, when we tender our contracts, we are very clear in our requirements of what we are expecting from people come forward to tender, companies come forward to tender. We ask them to submit their commitments in terms of, you know, how much they will commit to in terms of local suppliers, percentage of local workforce that they will commit to having in the borough, and number of apprenticeships as key performance areas. But we also ask those tendering to set out what additional benefits they bring to the borough in line with the council's strategic priorities. I mean, where we go from there is the promises made at that tender stage are then made part of their contractual commitments. So the company who wins the tender will put those commitments in their tender, in their contract. And at this point, it's important to note, I think, that members of the Tenants Excellence Panel also we have trained to help us in procurement. They assist us in the tender evaluations, and they play a part now in marking the submissions in terms of customer care and social value. So once we've agreed a contractor and they've submitted over the successful tender, and we appoint somebody and we give them a contract, we've written it in their contract. But how we make sure that these things really happen is that we talked a lot about performance monitoring tonight, but we monitor these social value commitments alongside all our other KPIs. So we might monitor, you know, the repairs contractor, how fast they do repairs, if they turn up on time, etc. But at the same meetings, we are also monitoring their commitments they've made in terms of social value, in terms of how many apprentices they said they've had, what the percentage they're buying in the borough. We'll do all of that at these meetings every month, so that it doesn't slide off the agenda at all. We also, because we have a number of big contractors in place in housing, we have a joint meeting every couple of months with our different contractors, all in the same room together. We do this bi-monthly to make sure that the different commitments that are coming through are aligned and the partners are working together to achieve the best outcome. If we then look at item 3.1 at the top of page 57, you can see that just some of the headline performance in the local targets for last year. So you'll see the 3 key biggest contract areas we've got, and you can see some of the performance numbers there in that table. Following on in the report, we've set out under 3 key themes different examples of the local projects that we get in addition to that performance. So in addition to what they buy locally, the apprenticeship sector, we get investment locally in terms of time, money, all sorts of different things, as you can see in the report. And I won't go through all of those, you know, they're all there, and I'm sure you've read them. But you might notice in there that some projects will probably fall into different categories. Some projects are, you know, have an economic benefit as well as a social benefit. But that just gives you an example there. Most of these projects here have been identified through engagement with local communities. So part of what we expect from our contractors, we expect them to be talking to the local community. They work very closely with our resident engagement team. They go to the local residents meeting, they find out what's important on the estates that they're working on. And many of these projects have been developed in response to what local resident groups are telling them that is important to them. There's no one size fits all. You know, what's needed on one side of the borough is definitely not the same as what's needed on the other. So really, in summary, the report outlines the principles that we apply to our contracts, gives some examples of the recent achievements, and just to say that moving forward, the same principles intend to be applied to all our new procurements. Some of our contracts are coming up for renewal very shortly, and we will be applying these similar principles to that to ensure that what we're getting come forward aligns with the Council's strategic priorities, and that anything that is committed to at that stage for the winning tender will become contractual, and we'll follow it through and make sure it is actually delivered. I trust this gives you a good outline of the framework and what we're doing here. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Sue. Do we have anything from Lynn?
Yes, there is. So on page 57, Lynn asked if the apprentices are from Thurrock. Are there any brought in from other areas that's outside of Thurrock? She said the training given on procurement and tender was excellent and she has attended this herself. Regarding weights, she asked if the excellence panel could be provided with a report that details the works and programmes that's run by Waits and other providers. It's ideal for the Residents Association to know of these works and programmes so they are up to date on what takes place within their community, as they are not informed of these. And that's it.
Okay, are you happy that I answered the question?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a requirement that apprenticeships have to be from Thurrock residents. That is a requirement of the apprenticeships. We're not bringing people that are outside of the Thurrock apprenticeships at all. I'm pleased to hear that Lynn enjoyed the training on the procurement and tender. Lynn is active on a member of helping us mark tenders as we go out, and that's been really useful. In terms of weights, we can provide feedback from any of the contractors to the excellence panel, and if the excellence panel wish to invite any contractor along to report on how they're doing, then that's fine, and we can easily arrange that. I think we have MEARS attend quite regularly. Weights have been a little while. We are coming into the last year of the current Transforming Homes contract, and we will be procuring again, and it might be a good time for people to report on what they've achieved under the current contract. So we can arrange that easily. Was there anything else? I'm sorry, did I miss anything there? Or did that cover it?
I think, yeah, that covered it all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anybody join to see your hand up? You on mute?
Hey, Sue.
I can hear you now.
Thank you. Just really, it's good to see sort of a number of careers working within the schools in Thurrock. That's really good, especially the Surfaces College. I just wanted to make a point of when you've got things that are happening in the borough as a whole, projects that are going forward or have already happened, it would be good to be in a little bit more detail. So, because Pilgrims Lane, Gammerfield site, people would look at Gammerfield site and wonder where the hell is it? You know, I know Gammerfield site's in my ward, but I think we just need to be a bit more specific on where these places are. You know, by just giving a perhaps Lime Close Community Hall, perhaps if members of the public are reading that, they don't really know where it is. So that's all I would ask, is a little bit more specific in giving us the area. Most of us as members, we know where it all is in Thurrock, but it's just other people reading it. So not really picking a hole, but just a little, you know, more specific on that, please. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. No, point taken. Yes, it probably, if we include the ward on a bit more about exactly where it is.
Lovely, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Has anybody else got anything that they want to say on this?
No.
No. Okay. So I requested this because I know the good work that happens with social value, and and it often goes unnoticed. And I think that it's important that we celebrate lots of stuff in the council, and the work that goes on with social value is, well, I'm a big fan of it. Yeah. Is there I know they don't give us money, but is there a can we add it up financially? What social value brings in as a pound to pound? What's it worth really?
Now that is a really interesting question, because there is no one method of measuring the value at the moment. So each of the contractors tends to use a different model. So there are various models out there which actually add up money that they've actually spent, hours, the cost of the hours that they put into it, the cost of equipment, etc. And there are models that do that. Now, I'm working with a corporate group that is reviewing the corporate social value framework, and we're feeding into that, because what we're hoping to achieve is a corporately agreed way of measuring, so that we can get like a level playing field. Because if I told you now what one company said that theirs was worth, if goes to another one, they probably aren't measuring exactly the same.
Okay, thank you. And
Lynn.
Sorry. Hello?
It's
Joy. Do you want to come back in, Joy? Go on then, Joy. No, I don't.
I don't want to pick holes, Sue, anything, but I know in my own ward, and what we do, it would be nice if we could pick up what's happening in lots of the wards as well, which is done through funding. Nothing to ask the council for. There's a lot of community groups out there who do get together and do it unsung. They do lots of work within, we do it in my ward. We just get on with it and do it, and build it and make sure it gets through. It just would be nice to see something coming from those community groups, which we could perhaps fill into you, and it could come forward at perhaps a later date. It would be good. Okay, thank you.
Could I just, Chair, is it all right if I just ask a quick question on that to clarify, John?
Right, you think so, yeah.
Thank you. Just on that, I mean, if it's local community groups that are looking to perhaps work with some of our contractors to help them, we're always happy to hear from those things. We work, feed through over to myself or our resident engagement team, because we're always happy to hear from those things, and perhaps we can find ways of working as support to each other.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Sue. Lovely.
So when we're, sorry, I have got a couple of questions. So when we're renegotiating our contracts, do you reckon we could push them for a few more apprenticeships? It does feel a little bit low, and considering going forward, we're going to have a lot of young people that come out of university, they aren't going to be able to get a job. They're coming out of college, they're not getting jobs, I feel like we're in a different world. Is it something that we could push, to maybe get a few more apprenticeships out of our people that we give millions of pounds to?
I think that's a very good point, and I'll take that away with me, where we're looking at some procurements at the moment. What we need to do with the apprenticeships, obviously, we need, some of the contracts aren't long enough to sustain a proper apprenticeship. It does depend. Obviously, the bigger contracts, the longer terms can. We are looking at procuring for slightly longer periods, which will help, because you usually want 2 years of a contractor around and running something to get some good apprenticeships attached to it. So that will help us to sustain more apprenticeships, and we will be pushing in our requirements. I've been working on for the procurement, so we definitely will be pushing for more apprenticeships to follow through. And we're also pushing for the work with the children at the school age as well, so that we're doing the work experience, and Mia's are continuing to do their trade school, which helps get people. Some of the apprenticeships have come from the trade school, which is really good as well. So yes, I absolutely agree. I'll take that away with me as an action to be working on.
Thank you. Yeah, and just sorry, George, just before I let you in, just find a way of tracking outcomes from social value, because I'm sure it'll add to the corporate scorecard somewhere, for whether it's like the people that we work with on other projects, whether they've been able to get trained, not just the trade school and like the apprenticeship. I can see that like you're doing other stuff with the colleges, It's all about outcomes. We all live in an outcome world, and I just think that the work goes on, it'd just be good you know, maybe I think you just deserve a glossy once a year, you know, like we have, or it should at least go in the scrutiny report, social value, because I think it is really good work.
Thank you.
Joy, I know you wanted to come back in, did you?
Yeah, you just made me think of something, Lynn. Perhaps we should be looking also at procurement for some small businesses that are out there who are in Thurrock, working for Thurrock. Might be something you can pick up on, Sue. Something we might be able to take offline. But we've got a lot of small businesses out there who would be willing to take on apprenticeships. They might not be very big firms, but they do a lot of good work in Thurrock. So I think that's something we should pick up on as well. You know, it's not always the big firms that we should be looking at. We should be looking at some of our good Thurrock small businesses that are out there really working hard, which could bring that on, and we could use them in the procurement system as well. So that might be something I can speak to you offline.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And my last one was just maybe in transforming homes, you know, 60%, maybe they could use some more Thurrock suppliers. You know, that's quite, you know, maybe again in difficult times, you know, I'd rather we spend our money and they spend their money locally, you know, because I think that, you know, same as not going out of the country this year, I think we should all be spending our money and get our economy back together again. Thank you. But other than that, I haven't got anything else. But well done, Sue. It's good work.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything for? We were going to read the recommendations on page 55 of the report. And thanks for that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Worrell, you're on mute.
Sorry. So we're just moving on to item 10, which is the Housing Service COVID-19 response report on page 63 to 74. And can I ask Ryan Farmer to introduce this report?
Sorry, Chair.
I'm going to steal his thunder and introduce it for Wendy.
Okay, Carol. Yeah, okay.
Wendy, were you trying to say something?
No, sorry, I was just going to say, Chair, if you would like to suspend standing orders now, we've got 15 minutes to go. Or would you like to suspend?
Okay. Does everybody agree? This is the last report, so can we suspend standing orders? It is quite an important report as well, and I don't want to push it down the road anywhere. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Agreed. Yep. Agreed.
Okay, so you all know what's happened. It's been a pandemic. It's had a big impact on all the council services. So this sets out very clearly what services we've suspended, altered and reduced, and then goes through each of our service areas. It also includes new build housing development. So thank you, Keith and David, for sticking around. It's very straightforward, gives you information. I do have some more up-to-date information on some areas, but not all of them. So I think I'll just hand over to questions, which I may, in the time-on tradition, refer to Ryan when they get too difficult.
Okay, and do we have anything from Lynn?
Yes, we do, Chair.
Okay, let's do our first.
Yeah, so Lynn said that the service has been excellent in handling the COVID-19 crisis. What she said though is that she did receive some reports at the beginning of lockdown where elderly residents saying that workers had been going into the homes of vulnerable residents to undertake maintenance checks. However, when she spoke with the council about this has been stopped now, so she thanks the service for resolving this quickly. And she also said that at the start of the lockdown, she received a letter stating that she was vulnerable and to follow all the shielding guidelines and how to register, and she was offered a food package as well. However, she was supposed to receive a phone call but hadn't received a phone call, and she's suggesting that an aftercare service should have been in place to ensure that vulnerable residents are checked on with a phone call to check how they are, if their situation had changed or whether they needed any more food packages. That was her comments.
Okay, so the housing service has not been organising the food packages, although we have been liaising where appropriate with the Thurrock Coronavirus Community Action, who are the arrangers of the food packages. Lynn lives in sheltered housing, and what the sheltered housing service did do in preparation for lockdown, as set out in the report, is contact all the residents in sheltered housing to ask them if they wanted a daily contact. They already were doing daily contact with some of the residents, but they increased that number. They reached out to them and said, do you want us to contact you every day? They contact everybody at least twice a week, whether they want it or not, just so they can make sure that people are still well and keep track of them if anything happens. So Lynn should have been contacted at least twice a week by her sheltered housing officer, and would have had the opportunity in those conversations to raise any concerns she had about her food parcels, her shielding status, or anything else. And because I know sheltered housing officers have been sorting some of those things out for the residents, certainly the liaising with the TCCA over food parcels. And also, as it says in the report, residents have been contacted who are not in sheltered housing as well, though there isn't the same intensity of that contact. There has been a lot of contact from the tenancy management and rents and welfare team for other residents who we identified as vulnerable. And we have been supplied with the shielding list on a regular basis by colleagues in public health. And we've kept our records up to date as to who is shielding and been in contact with those people because a large number of people have been added in sort of the last month or so. The list has changed and more people have been added by their doctors or whatever. So we have been sending that out and making sure that our records record where necessary the people who are shielding, and that we're aware of that additional vulnerability that they have. Have I answered the question, Wendy?
Is anybody else? Joy, I can see your hand up. Kaiser, you second.
Thank you. Thanks, Carol. Yeah, I mean, I've had nothing but good back from a lot of elderly. As Carol knows, I do keep an eye on my residents in my own ward, so I am always phoning them, making sure they're fine if they need anything. Trying to look after yourself as well is a bit more sort of, you don't worry about that, you know. But I think Lynn's got a fair point there, Carol, that perhaps we ought to, the aftercare, because this pandemic has a lot of people out there very lonely, and as we've said many times before, and Lynn knows, loneliness kills. And I think we've got a lot of residents out there who this will have had an impact on. And when it's coming to the end, it might not be the end for them, because they will still feel that they haven't got the technology that we've got, some of them, you know. But I've had nothing but good back from what the council is doing, and we don't get a lot of that. We don't get a lot of people saying how well the council's done. You know, officers have been involved in lots of good things. So I think we ought to show that, you know, that the people, the residents out there are really pleased with what's happened. The food parcels going out to people. But I think we've got to look at that aftercare and still, you know, whether we're 2 months in, you know, at a later stage, we ought to still check on those people who are very lonely, because that loneliness will have kicked in big time now. You know, it might have been lonely before, but they're even more lonely. Some, you know, it isn't all the food parcels and the things, it's just talking to them they need. So I think that aftercare package would be good to do something for them, you know, after, and when and if we come out of this way. Thank you, Carol, for hard work.
Thank you, Joy, for those kind words about the service. Certainly,
it's brilliant.
From a sheltered housing perspective, they don't have any intention of stopping those contacts anytime soon. And obviously, I don't think any of us have any idea when after will be with this.
No.
Oh, you know, and either when we get a treatment or we get a vaccine, and I don't know that we're close to either of those things yet. So I'm not sure when after will be, but certainly I think there's some questions about how long the food parcels will go on for, what's going to happen with the shielding. There's supposed to be new guidance coming out on that this week, but I'm not aware that it has come out yet. But Roger has his hand up, so maybe he knows.
Got you, Terry, as well. So after Councillor Ebber.
You're passing the difficult questions on to me now.
Yes,
just a couple of comments on the shielded list to follow up what Councillor Red saw. So, there are now over 10,000 people on the shielded list. What was sometimes called Category A. It started off as 3,500 and it's grown now to over 10,000 as more and more people have been added. So it's quite and these are people who are not necessarily. These are people who are classified as severe critical risk and very vulnerable. So it's quite a high threshold. So just to reassure Joy that we have been cross-referencing it with adult social care data as well. So we've identified people who are known to domiciliary care, who may be known to receiving, Meals on Wheels. So we've been cross-referencing it so that they get to Thurrock first, or TCCA will be making that phone call. They've all been asked to register, and about half have registered on a list. So they do get the government or organised food supplies, which is weekly. And this is the one that Carol's referring to. We believe that's going to continue until the end of July, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. So it might even be slightly earlier, but we think it's likely to be the end of July. And then we'll have to make a decision as to whether the council continues that or continues some form of support. Through the volunteer network under TCCA, they've all been doing regular phone checks as well. So it's not only about food supply, but can they get their medication? Are there any other particular needs that they've got? We've had dog walking arranged. We've had arranged people's toenails to be cut. So there's been quite a package of support just to make sure that people aren't lonely and isolated, because this is one of the consequences. So I think the support across the council, but also through the voluntary sector and all the volunteers that we've had, we've almost, I think, been able to, within 2 hours of a call with our target. So if we got a call into TCCA hotline, we want to try and make contact with that person within 2 hours, and we pretty much delivered that. So I think we need to think about that going forward, because we know a lot of information now about people. We've also been working with their GP. They've had regular texts and information from their GPs as well. So we have tried to give that sort of very, very comprehensive package. I'm sure there's more we can still do. I think that has been quite something to be proud of.
Chair, could I just come back quick on that?
You can quickly, Joy, because I've got 2 more.
Terry wasn't supposed to be here. He's just substituted, isn't he? Councillor Piccolo is just substituting tonight. What I'd like to do is, through you, Chair, to thank him. He has sent a letter out to everybody that's helped and given them a badge, and I thought it was a really lovely touch just to thank people. It didn't need to be a lot. I got one myself, so really want to, through you, Chair, just to thank him so much for doing that little thing. All right.
Well done, Terry. Well done. I know loads of people are wearing them, so I've seen quite a few people in them already. Yes, it's been really good. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Abbasson and Councillor Piccolo, yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Piccolo. I have received the letter as well, but without the badge, so thank you. And thank you, Roger and Carol, for all your hard work. I know a lot of other councils, I think the work you guys have been doing during this period, that was really amazing, So thank you for that. So I just want to, it's really not just a comment, it's just a kind of appreciation, regarding these homeless and rough sleepers, and particularly the assurance you have given, so these, you will make sure no one returns to streets. So well done. So I hope, you will deliver this promise. And another thing, because there are some residents, who are in private sectors, and even I emailed to housing and some, on members, but I haven't received any reply. So there was few individuals who are renting, in rooms or shared rooms, in shared accommodations, but unfortunately their landlords, they haven't given them any tenancy, So they are taking cash from them, the cash rent, they don't give them any receipts. So I'm aware of a few individuals. So the landlords, they ask them just to vacate the property, even though I'm aware, there is a legislation, they cannot evict them through court, but there are some private landlords who are doing these things, who are putting these people on the streets, So do you have any measures to kind of put in place against these private landlords?
First of all, thank you very much for your kind words about the service. Obviously, there are over 250 staff in the housing service, so they've done all the hard work, not me or Roger, really. So it's really a thank you to them rather than to us two. I'll come back to the rough sleeps in a minute. On your final point, this is a kind of, it's not a grey area in the law. The law's very clear. The government's prohibition on eviction is people who have tenancy agreements. People who don't have tenancy agreement or are staying with somebody or live with their landlord may be on a form of license agreement and they're not covered by the same protection. They don't have to go to court to end those licenses. So those people may still present to us as homeless, although we aren't seeing very many presentations at the moment. So I don't think a lot of landlords are indulging in those kinds of practices. Where we get wind of it, then we will intervene if we can with the landlord. So I haven't seen your inquiry. So if you want to send it to me, I can work out what's going on with it, because I don't see all the inquiries anyway. But I'm not aware of your inquiry. So if you want to send it to me, then I can get the private sector housing team to make sure they answer it.
Thank you.
Councillor Piccolo.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Abbas asked a point about
sorry.
As well. So yes, the government's intention and our intention is that nobody should return to the streets. So we currently have 33 households, 1 couple and 32 single people, 5 women and 27 men. Who we have picked up through the Everyone In government approach on homelessness. We only 10 of those people are over 35. So the bulk of them will have to go into shared housing, because unless they're earning their own money on benefits, they can only get the shared room rate of local housing allowance. 2 of those people have no recourse to public funds, so they won't be able to move on. They have no access to benefits, so unless they can support themselves, they won't be able to, or regularise their immigration status. It's the other option. 27 of those people do have access to benefits. So our plan is to ensure they don't return to the streets. At the moment, 14 of them are in Stifford Clays Hotel and 19 in our normal temporary accommodation arrangements. So we've looked at them, divided them up into 3 sort of different categories. So 20 of them can move into the private rented sector. They don't need a high level of support. So they'll be shared or self-contained depending on their age and income. There'll be some in reach and some floating support to support them and sustain their tenancies, but they're not people with particularly high needs. 3 of them will go into rooms that are run by Mind, and there will be some support from Mind and some support from other services. And then there are 10 of them who have higher needs, who will need to go into our Housing First programme or into supported accommodation. And we're working with Keith and his team to look at what our options are in terms of delivering more supported accommodation, working with registered providers to get more nominations, or what's in the development pipeline and what we could repurpose, so to speak, to enable us to have somewhere for all of the rough sleepers to go. So those are our plans at the moment on that point. I think have I answered all your questions now, Councillor Abbas?
Sorry, no, thank you. Yeah, you have almost answered. You mentioned there were some few 2 or 3 residents without no recourse to public funds, the immigration issue. So what are we going to do about those people?
At the moment, we will keep them in the accommodation that they're in, because we're committed to nobody going back to the streets. We will try and get them the support to either to return to work, because some of them can work, they just can't get any recourse to benefits, or to regularise their immigration status so that they can have access to benefits. There's 2 people at the moment. I think one of them is older and maybe overstayed her visa. I don't know about the other one. So yes, so we'll try and work with them. But ultimately, people who have no recourse to public funds, who are single, don't have any children, we don't really have, the whole point about no recourse public funds is that they're not supposed to be accessing public services. But at this point, we're keeping them and trying to work with them to resolve the issues they have, and try to not let them get back onto the streets. But they are much more difficult, those two, to rehouse.
Councillor Piccolo.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just regarding the TCCA. I had pleasure in sending out over 500 letters to people that have volunteered locally to help. I've had a little bit of feedback because obviously there's only so much work that they can do, and some of them feel that they volunteered and they haven't been used. Going back on the point about people feeling lonely, whether or not we can ask the TCCA to see whether or not any of the volunteers will be prepared to make weekly phone calls or regular phone calls to a resident that's feeling a bit isolated, because obviously there's not that many people that go and do shopping for, pick up prescriptions for, but a 10-minute phone call once a week or however often may be something that just helps with that problem. So I know there's probably need to be some checks or whatever that was going on, but that's one way we could look at utilising those 500 volunteers that feel that they are volunteered and not actually doing anything, and it will give them a sense of achievement as well. That was it. Just
Roger, thanks, Terry. I can see that Roger's got his hand up, so he must have something important to tell you.
I'll let others be the judge of that. Certainly the Stronger Together group, Councillor Piccolo, that you'll be very familiar with, has been looking about how we can utilise some of those volunteers. And there's a programme called Our Road that they've started that looks very much about how we can use all of those, both the neighbour contacts, the local businesses, the volunteers, local area coordinators, looking to try and develop those contacts at the local level. And that will involve, in some cases, they've got a list of people who really appreciate the phone calls. So we really don't want this to be a missed opportunity. And there's some really, you'll know how energetic Jackie is and the crew that engage. So they've really got some very good ideas about how we can use volunteers going forward. So I'll make that point to them, but I know they are taking that up very seriously.
Yeah, so it's just that we've got this cohort of volunteers, and if they feel they're not being used, if we call them in 5 or 6 months' time, they might think we didn't use this last time. Why should we get engaged now? So we can utilise them just to make that weekly phone call to someone that feels a bit isolated. It will serve two purposes. One, it'll help the person that's feels isolated, but it also goes to someone that wanted to volunteer and help out in this instance, a sense of achievement as well. So I think that was it.
Joy, something else? Sorry, Terry.
Only something very brief. Carol just mentioned Stifford Clay's hotel. Did you mean North Stifford Motorhouse was being used? Because it's not in Stifford Clay.
No, it's a bed and breakfast, Joy, along the A13 as you're coming off. Like the one that sits back.
Right, so it's
the B&B. The B&B.
Oh, right, I know what you mean now. On the A13, yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I just know it's called the Stifford Clays Farm Hotel.
Yeah.
I don't actually know whether it's in Stifford Clays or not. I just know that's.
No, that's all right.
It's all right. You've got me and Joy. We know our way around the borough. We know where it's.
Yeah.
Well, I have got a couple of bits. First of all, I'd like to echo everybody else in that I think, up against it, we pretty much pulled off, what we would expect, and I think that the housing team, working with the volunteer team and the homeless groups and, different individuals, I see this week that the people that are homeless, somebody dropped out of being able to provide one of their evening meals. So went on social media and now somebody else is providing all the meals, on a Saturday night. So I think that businesses, individuals, everybody has just done amazingly. So well done to your team, Carol. But also, I know at the beginning it was really difficult with the sheltered housing people, and I had to come to you a couple of times. But Sue Kane and her team have done really good, and I think shutting down our sheltered housing as quickly as we did prevented that going through, you know, and I know they didn't like not having a washing machine or access and who's not going in the right door and following the right. But I think we shut it down and just to have, was it three deaths? That's all we've had. You know, that is pretty remarkable. So well done to the housing team for putting that on. So please pass on that to everybody involved within your team.
Will do. Thank you very much.
The homeless stuff, obviously that would have been top of my agenda for that. So is your team now working with the private landlords? Because, you know, like when they say, oh, you go and find something and we'll pay the rent, you know, the private landlords going, we don't want rent to you, you know, like, so are they going to be stuck if not finding somewhere to live?
We employ people whose entire job it is to work with private landlords to find places, particularly for single people. So we do have an entire officer and 2 actual posts, but only 1 person in post at the moment whose job it is to do that. So yes, we are working with private landlords. Loretta's been working with the comms team, and in my inbox is a revised press release to go out to encourage landlords to work in partnership with us. So Loretta's been pushing for a while for, you know, it's been sort of on the back burner with all the other stuff that's been going on through the pandemic, but now we're going to be trying to encourage more landlords to work with us, because it's the only way that we can provide all the housing that we need for the people who approach us.
I'm so pleased to hear that no one's going off that cliff edge. It was like music to my ears to be able to hear that. So so that was really good. So can you just tell me a little bit about, like, is this affected our rent budget, our rent accounts? You know, is it, you know, massively affecting, you know, are people being able to pay their rent, or have we got a big backlog, and what will that mean for the service over the next year?
Okay, so as I said earlier, we have had an increase in the number of tenants on universal credit. So at the end of last week, we had 2,581. 1,414 of those cases have arrears of £100 plus, and those arrears amount to £1,242,000. Our collection rate is 84.6%, which actually is pretty good at this time of the year. We have been contacting tenants. As I said earlier, we've had the texting that's gone on. We obviously have both financial inclusion officers and the service that's provided by St Mungo's for people to give people debt advice. So we have been working. So for the last 10 weeks of this financial year, the debit amount has been 10,766,000, and the team have collected housing benefit and cash to the total of 10,270,000. So that's a 95.39 collection for this financial year, which, bearing in mind we've not been able to send any arrears letters, or that we're not threatening people with court action, because, as I said earlier, we don't know when we'll get to take any court action. All of this has been done through the texting, through welfare calls, through all those kind of methods. The rents and welfare team phoned everybody who we had on our vulnerable list in the first 4 to 5 weeks. And since then we've been monitoring people. We've been trying also to use this period to encourage people to move away from pay point and post office payments, which for us are the most expensive form of payment, but also for the residents meant that they would have to leave their house, go into a place with other people, that's putting themselves more at risk of catching the virus. So we've been trying to encourage people to go to standing orders and direct debits, those kinds of payments where they don't have to interact with the outside world to do it. But it's undoubtedly the case that the amount of people who have lost their jobs and the increase in people who've gone on to universal credit because of the average 5-week wait to get a universal credit claim through. In April, it was longer than that because of the enormous amount of claims that the DWP received across the country. So that has had an impact. It's had an impact on all social landlords on their rent collection.
Thanks, and thank you for bringing this report really late. I know I sort of like said, can I have it really late? And, you know, but, you know, I think it was useful that we did get a really good idea. I think that what's come out of it is actually quite positive, that the housing department has done a good job in difficult times. So well done, Carol, Roger, and everybody. I haven't got any more questions. Does anybody else? Nope. Okay, so if we can just agree the report.
Agreed.
Page, I don't know even know what page it is now.
The work programme is
so,
the only thing we've got left now.
Work programme on, yep, so that was page 63. So then we just move on to the work programme, which is already really busy, but does anybody have anything that they want to add or amend on the work programme for the rest of the year?
I have some amendments.
Okay.
So because of the ongoing pandemic and everything, we are going to have to push back both the homelessness prevention and rough strategy action plan. And because we haven't had the homelessness partnership board has only met once, and we really want to make sure that we've engaged all the health partners. So we're going to need to push that back. And also because of the general uncertainty around the whole economic situation of the entire country, Roger's agreed that we push the housing strategy back for 6 months as well. So we aren't even going to start working on that for another 6 months. The phase that sort of Ryan would be in now would be collecting data and doing a lot of data analysis. But the data that we have now isn't really going to tell us anything about where we're going to be next month, never mind in 2 or 3 months' time. So it just seems like this is a really uncertain period and there's so much going on that we couldn't really draw any strong conclusions from anything we did right now. So we're going to give it 6 months and then pick it up again. The second phase that Ryan would have been doing or would have been consultation, broad consultation. And again, that's not something that we can really do at this time. So we're going to push both of those back. And then in January, I wanted to add in, we've commissioned the BRE, the Building Research Establishment, to do some work on private sector stock conditions survey and the conditions for potentially moving towards selective licensing. And that we hope allows us, we can have a report in January on that. The work will take about 3 months to do. So hopefully he'll be able to bring a report in January on how we're getting on with that. We're a little bit, you know, obviously again, there's been an impact. We're a bit further behind than we'd have wanted to be. So I wanted to add that into the January meeting.
So has anybody got anything that they want on or brought forward or anything for the September meeting? Or if there is, could you let Carol know so she can arrange for it to go on the work programme? Because at the moment we've only got 2 items then for September.
Yeah, sorry about that, Chair. It's just this.
It's okay. I'm sure we'll find something for you, Carol. Don't worry. We might need another COVID update by then.
Chair, just glad to see the garage project there.
Yes, don't worry, Joy. It's there.
I wrote chasing that and making sure that report was being written like yesterday, Councillor Edsel. So it's definitely on the agenda very firmly.
Okay, so if everybody can just put their thinking caps on and just think about the whole of the housing service, and if there's anything you'd like to see on there, then, you know, really good. But other than that, I think that we've made it to the end of the meeting. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
and
Chair.
I'm now closing the meeting at 21:46. So thank you very, very much, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe.
Right then.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
File.
Bye-bye. Get out of here. Can't get out of it now.